This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
It just might be the greatest sports franchise in the history of sports. A place where legends are made, and there's always something to talk about. Get ready to immerse yourself in pinstripes. Start spreading the news, hosted by Paul Semendinger and E.J. Fagan, a couple of doctors with a prescription for Yankee fever. And now, here's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Get ready to start spreading the news.
All right, and here we are, Monday night, the day after Mother's Day. Paul Semendinger along with EJ. Now, EJ, last week you weren't here, and at the end of the show, Mike Whiteman and Andy Singer were laughing, and you had put a comment in the comments, and I missed it. And I would have loved to put it up. It was something like, Paul, I hope you don't show up next week, or something like that.
I believe I was responding back to you. Yes. I was traveling last week. I got back to my hotel room from dinner, and I see a little Twitter post that says you guys are live on Twitter. Maybe try to ask you guys some questions.
That was fun. Yeah, you jumped into the comments. That was great. That was a whole lot of fun. But whatever the funny comment was, it was like, and the funny thing is, to all our fans who watch every week and listen and all that kind of stuff, there is the possibility that I could get called off the show at any moment. My eldest son and his wife are expecting twins, and they're due to come any day or any week. And so it could happen any moment. And so there was the possibility that it wasn't going to be here. And that would have even been funnier. Like, I hope you're not here next week, or it'll be nice to do it without you next week, or something like that. And then I don't show up. That would have been funny.
Yeah, I think that'd be a very good reason to miss a show. If we have to do a show without you for the next couple of weeks, we'll figure that out.
We'll figure that out. The only way I wouldn't be here is if the baby is coming on a Monday night in the evening or we're traveling to get there. Real quick note, we are brought to you, of course, by Artemisia Publishing. You can find their wonderful books at apbooks.net. Start Spreading the News is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing, a small independent publisher bringing you quality books from quality authors, including the wonderful novel Scattering the Ashes. EJ, I'm working with a production company in New York. We're going to bring that to audiobook. There's going to be an audiobook for Scattering the Ashes.
That's fantastic. That is funny. I've been thinking about my own book, and the academic books usually don't end up as audiobooks. They don't sell enough copies. But I happen to be a longtime podcaster, and so I wonder. I've been thinking about recording the audiobook. It's a long process. It's a week at least. But I think I might do it one day.
I'll let you know how it goes. I'm going to a professional studio in New York. We're just finalizing the details and the costs and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I'm going to be the narrator, so it'll be kind of fun. Yeah, I think it'll be great.
I mean, I personally love audiobooks read by the author. Not even just biographical books, but just books read by the author. But when they're biographical like yours is, it's something different. I mean, it's a novel. I'm sorry. Scattering the Ashes. It's not your running book, which would be a wonderful audiobook with your voice.
Yes. Well, maybe if Scattering the Ashes sells 1 billion copies or so, then the publisher will say, let's take the running book and make that also into an audiobook. I hope so.
I mean, some of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to were read by the author. My favorite audiobook ever is Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, which is the book that made him famous, that he wrote, I believe, while he was still working in restaurants. And it's a book of an insane person. And then he's reading years later, I think, with a little bit of reflection, the insane stories that he is telling. And it is fantastic. He's got a Jersey accent. If you haven't read Kitchen Confidential, one of the best books I've ever read.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
EJ, one other non-baseball topic. I'm exciting. Let me see if I can't get a picture up here, because this is kind of fun. I'm going to run the New York City Marathon again, but this year in November, I'm going to be running for the Sesame Workshop. Yes. So Elmo and I, Elmo's not running it, but he's going to cheer me on. And tomorrow night, my wife and I are actually getting to go into the city to go to a workshop where we're going to doodle and draw with one of the Sesame Street artists, I guess, who draws Muppets and stuff.
That's
So,
incredible. There's a Jim Henson documentary coming out soon that I'm very excited for.
Oh, I want to see that.
Fascinating guy. And, one of those artists that I think we would have genuinely different movies and TV if he had lived longer. So I'm excited for that documentary. I've seen, I think it's Netflix. I forget what it's on, but it's coming out pretty soon.
That sounds awesome. So, what's really terrific, EJ? And it's amazing we're saying this because I don't know if we were this optimistic, but the Yankees have been playing great. They win series after series. They just took 2 of 3 from the Tampa Bay Rays, and they're rolling. And you have told me and kept me in suspense that there's some really exciting StatCast data.
Yeah, and today was Christmas morning, right? I woke up and under my tree was some data I wasn't expecting. StatCast has been tracking all season, and now the data is live. Bats, so they've actually been tracking the location of every batter's bat throughout the season.
All right,
we only have it for this one season. So what it means is that they know how fast a bat is moving, and they know how far it is moving. So let me share a screen real quick, just so we can just.
This is actually interesting because I'm gonna as you're getting ready to do this, I'm gonna say to you that one of our writers, who goes by Professor Robert often on Start Spreading the News, one of our readers, came up with an interesting stat, and I put it out there to a couple of people online, like Bill James and Katie Sharp and Saber and a couple other Yankee stats, something or other, and things like that. And I haven't gotten a reply yet from anybody. But before we get into what the StatCast data says, I'm just going to give you his idea. And I'm just give you a quick step back. You wrote that great article. We ran it on Stanton shouldn't be the DH. And I've been saying the similar types of things for about a year, that we get excited about the exit velo when he hits a big home run, and you say, oh my goodness, he just hit it 119 miles an hour and it went 537 feet. Didn't go that far, but you get the idea. And then that seems to cloud our judgment. We don't realize that he then grounded out weekly 47,000 more times, and he struck out 85 other times. So he's trying to come up with this stat called exit velo over at bats, which seems like something similar that you're coming up with. So if you go 1 for 4 and you strike out 3 times and you hit one ball hard in those 4 at bats, whether you get a hit or not, you hit it 100 miles an hour, but you whiff the other 3 times, that's 100 over 4, I guess.
Isn't it just average exit velo?
Do they have that stat?
Yeah. I mean, now what I guess what you're proposing here would take strikeouts and
yes,
and count.
We want to add the strikeouts in that.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I think that would tell you something about these kind of high strikeout players. So yeah, that's interesting. Barrels per plate appearance is one that StatCast puts out, and Stanton isn't great on that metric. So
all right, I'm gonna have to check that out. It's called barrels.
Yeah, so a barrel is a combination of exit velocity and launch angle, right? So it's you hit the ball hard and you hit the ball between, I think, 10 and 25 degrees, which is kind of your sweet spot for extra base hits. Anything above 40 degrees is basically a guaranteed pop up. Anything below 5 is a ground ball. And so Stan has a problem that he just he has a lot of negative exit launch angle. That is, he pounds the ball into the ground. And so he's a little bit weird in that way, but the point of that article was like his numbers are bad, and they're not even they're not that much different than last year. Mm-hmm. He's definitely had a few more kind of moments. He has more hits than last year. He's a higher batting average, but he has made up for it by walking less. Which on net has actually led to, I believe, a lower on-base percentage this year than in last year. Now, he does have a little bit more power, is a higher slug than he had last year by a little bit, not by a ton. And he has hit the occasional, 119 mile an hour home run that's kind of fun to watch. But I think the only conclusion you can have from looking at Stanton's numbers is that he shouldn't be in there. I mean, maybe he's in there now when you don't have any alternatives, but the second you have a Dominguez or you have a DJ LeMahieu, then I don't think there's a case for Stanton to stay in the lineup. We were talking earlier this season, like I kind of gave you three scenarios. So one of those scenarios was he's last year's Stanton. One of those was he's 2022 Stanton. And one of those was he's back, right? And if he's back, he's the DH, no problem. If he's 2022, I think he's a bad DH, right? I think you could do better. You could do someone who, for example, doesn't cost Austin Wells a single because he can't run from first to second, right? That's not a good DH. But we don't even have 2022 Stanton, right? We have 2023 Stanton right now, and I think that as soon as you have anybody else you can sub in there for him, I think you have to do it. And frankly, I would be DHing Austin Wells a lot. I mean, I think both Trevino and Wells are better hitters than Stanton right now, and Trevino's been really good, and Wells has been good on Statcast and not great on the other numbers. And I think that he's coming around, and I really like watching Austin Wells. There was a case that I made over the offseason that maybe Stanton's like a platoon player, but he's actually been better against righties than lefties this year. So that's not really holding up. I think that Stanton, we're going to see some stats about Stanton when we talk about bats, by the way. Some really fun stats about Stanton. But I think at the end of the day, like the numbers just don't hold up. Like his ex-WOBA this year is 312. For a DH, you can't run or play or have any other use on the team. Like that is unacceptable. It's untradeable. He is not a major league player right now. And the only reason why I'm not like angrier is that the Yankees don't really have anyone else to sub in.
Right. And they're winning.
John Birdie, I guess, and they're winning. Right. I mean, I think about, Gleyber Torres is struggling right now. And I think there's some reason why you want to keep trying Gleyber Torres. You put him out there because you're still winning and there's upside. The upside is that he gets back to last year. It wasn't that long ago. And we've seen Gleyber Torres go through these slumps before, figure it out, and then get really hot and stay really good. For Stanton, I don't think there's any hope. Like, I don't think there's a world where we see Giancarlo Stanton, at least this season, better. Maybe this is a wake-up call, and instead of losing a bunch of weight, he says, what I really need to do is go and remake my swing. You're going to see some really interesting Stanton stuff with the bat speed stats.
No, let's get to it.
Let's get to it. So I have a screen for you to see. Okay. So this is right here, the Statcast, new Statcast page. So we have a couple of things on this page. So we have the average bat speed on his top 90% of swings. The average major league player swings the bat at 72 miles per hour.
Well,
that's average.
Okay. So the average player swings the bat. Now, is this something that people have to subscribe to?
No, this is on Statcast. So you go to
just there.
Baseball Savant, and you can just get this.
All right.
Baseball's really good about making these data public, and then they put out a big explainer today. I think they let a couple of YouTubers see it a little bit early, so there's some videos explaining it. So if you look at, I think Foolish Bailey has a really good explainer on this. I'd recommend that. But here's what you have to know, right? You're measuring the top 90% of swings. There's a stat that's kind of measures like basically like check swings. That's why it's top 90%. So check swings, they call them swords because that's a phrase that Rob Freeman uses on Twitter. Those are not in that, right? So those, those kind of non-competitive, non-swings. So that's your top 90%. A fast swing is 75 miles per hour. So a fast swing is usually correlated with exit velocity. Swing speed is strongly related to exit velocity. Makes sense, right? You swing harder, you get more exit velocity, but not entirely, right? So the more square you hit a ball, the faster the exit velocity is. So we can measure how often people, quote unquote, square up, and they measure that by basically saying that they're close to the maximum theoretical exit velocity of that swing. So if you hit the ball, a little bit off, like off the end of the bat, well, then you don't get all of the benefit of your swing. So if you're right on the sweet spot, you get close to that maximum theoretical exit velocity. So we're going to have stats for how often batters are able to square up pitches. And then there's a quote unquote blast, which is just how often do batters square up a fast swing. It's a new stat. It's an interesting stat. We can take a look at some of those. We have swing length. So basically how far the swing has to travel. So we often talk about players with short and long swings. Well, we can now measure that, and there's some really big differences.
Now, interesting. Off the top of my head, when you think of some of the great hitters of all time, I think you look at Ted Williams' swing, you look at Will Clark's swing, you look at Ken Griffey Jr.'s swing, Darryl Strawberry's. They had big, long swings. Would you agree with that?
Some of them did, yeah. I mean, Strawberry is a very long swing.
Right. So you'd think that a big, long swing would be somebody who would, at least some of the great hitters had those big, long swings. So what, just off the real quick summation, what does a big, long swing typically mean? Does that mean you hit better or do you hit worse?
Well, I think the question is what happens when you have a long swing? You're going to strike out more, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe you'll also be able to get a little more leverage on the ball. Maybe a long swing allows you to uppercut a little bit so you can hit more home runs. We'll take a look at some of those batters and you tell me.
Okay, that'll be fun.
So who do you think is the fastest swinger, has the highest bat speed in Major League Baseball by a mile? It's not close.
Quickest bat speed in Major League Baseball by a mile.
If you had to pick, if you think about some historical players, Manny Ramirez, right? Bat speed guy. You think of him that way. I used to think about Clint Frazier as a bat speed guy.
Well, that's what they wanted. Nobody swings quicker than him. I'm going to guess Ohtani.
Well, the answer is, and again, this is not even close.
Juan
Soto?
Best
bat speed in baseball is Giancarlo Stanton.
How about that?
Yeah. I mean, and look at this. So he's at 81 miles per hour. O'Neal Cruz is at 78. And then you got a bunch of guys at 76, 77, right? Stanton is the outlier here. He also has a fast swing rate of 98%, which means every single time he swings over 75 miles per hour. That's pretty incredible. And we're going to look at some of those distributions in a second. It's going to look pretty cool.
But doesn't that say, so doesn't that say that Anthony Rizzo is someone who, when he gets two strikes, you see him shorten up? I did a book with Roy White. Roy White talked about that a lot. When I get two strikes, in fact, when Roy White first came up, the one season he was hitting a bunch of home runs and he's like, yeah, I can do this. And then he didn't hit a home run the rest of the year because he tried to hit home runs and it just threw his whole scheme off and he wasn't a home run hitter. Doesn't it say something poorly about the player? And let me take a quick step back too and say, I think we're all fans of Giancarlo Stanton. I like Giancarlo Stanton. I wish Giancarlo Stanton no ill. I like him. I want him to be productive. The question is he productive? This isn't about Giancarlo Stanton, the person. It's his production as a player. But doesn't it say something poorly about him as a player if he doesn't have any sense to not swing really hard?
So I had that exact same thought. Right. And so I started looking at these little visuals that they have here. I want to show you exactly Rizzo versus Stanton, because I think it's a fascinating comparison. But look at the names on the top of this list, right? O'Neal Cruz, Kyle Schwarber, Ronald Acuna Jr., Aaron Judge. Like, there's some pretty good names on this list. There's also some not great hitters on this list. Chapman. Frankly, O'Neal Cruz, I think, is not having a particularly great season. Joe Adell, kind of a failed top prospect. Julio Rodriguez is a guy who's been struggling a lot despite having a lot of talent. Like, this is a talented group of hitters, but it is not necessarily the best hitters in baseball. If we look at the lowest bat speed in baseball, would you like to guess another notable player who has the lowest bat speed in baseball?
You're almost setting me up to get to
so
say
who doesn't swing hard. It's interesting, right? It's not the worst player in baseball.
Yeah, I'm thinking Anthony Rizzo doesn't necessarily swing hard.
So the answer is, I'm trying to click on the wrong screen here. The answer is Luis Ariz.
Oh my goodness. That was my other way I was going to go. When we were talking about big swings, I was going to say guys like Rod Carew, Wade Boggs, they have that short, sweet swing.
Exactly.
And that's exactly to a lot of hits.
Right? Look at Stephen Kwan with the Guardians is number 2, right? Justin Turner, number 4. Alex Verdugo, number 12. These guys are not power hitters. You can't be a power hitter swinging like that. but they are really good singles hitters. So this is to me like, so when I talk about measurement with my graduate students, I teach a research methods course. I talk about, okay, you've measured something, you've tried to measure something. How do you tell if you've measured something interesting, something that's useful that you can then go do some science on? And one is what we call a face validity test. So if you do this and you say, oh, Giancarlo Stanton is number 1 and Luis Arias is number last, that's really cool, right? That tells you you're onto something. I think we're onto something here. Luis Arias has never swung the bat over 75 miles per hour. He's probably not capable of it. That means he is not going to hit a lot of home runs. You can hit a home run with a low bat speed, but it's got to be a pull right down the line or something like that, right? I mean, it's got to be a Yankee Stadium home run. It can't be a real good one. But let's take a look at Stanton versus Rizzo. So we're going to look right here. I am so happy that they gave me probability distributions. Because of course they did, right? So if you look at the dashed line, that is the average speed of a Major League Baseball swing. It is normally distributed. So you see the mean is about 72 miles per hour, right? And then roughly symmetric on both sides of that. That's a normal distribution. That is very normal, right? Nature is normal.
Regular bell curve. I mean, this is stats 101, right?
It's stats 101. It is what you see in nature. Now, not every distribution is normal, but anything that is the result of a bunch of different random things at the same time is normal. Now, if you look at Stanton's swing, it is also normal. It has lower variance than the average Major League swing, but it is roughly symmetric on both sides. It looks pretty good, pretty close to normal. But what that tells me is that for the most part, Stan is making the same swing every time, and there's some random factors that move it one way or another, right? So sometimes he just plants his foot a little bit differently, loses a couple miles per hour. Sometimes it's a little bit harder, but he's always making the same swing. Now let's look at Rizzo's. This is so cool. This is Rizzo's distribution. Look, burn Stanton's into your mind for a second. And here's Rizzo. Right? Look how fat that is. Not even a bell curve. Yeah. It's not a curve at all.
It's like Gibraltar.
Sometimes he takes the big swing, right? These are the Stanton swings right here. He is capable of, swinging for the fences. But then if you look at this, he's got, this is what I would call kind of his normal swing, which is like really less than Major League average, right? He doesn't swing hard all that often. And then look at this long tail. He's taking Luis Arias swings right here, right? I mean, this to me is just absolutely fascinating. Rizzo, this tells me, by the way, Rizzo's not a power hitter right now. If he was a power hitter, I would expect this to be bimodal, meaning that I would expect him to have some swings over here and some swings over here. This is not a bimodal distribution, but it's a skewed distribution with some really interesting features. I'm going to be watching this like all season because I think this is really cool. And it tells you like this is the guy choking up on the bat. Now let's just take a look at another player. Let's take a look at Anthony Volpe compared to Rizzo.
Oh, I was going to ask you, can you put them on top of each other?
You can put them on top of each other, right? This is like my dream tool. This is cool. So we can put Stanton on top of him. By the way, if we get rid of Volpe, let's put Stanton on there. Right, that's a very different distribution, very different batters. Let's put Volpe on top now. Right, Volpe is a little bit of both. Right,
so it's that interesting. Yeah,
it's a little more peaked than Giancarlo Stanton. First off, this
higher. He swings harder sometimes. That's what that higher peak means.
Yeah,
correct?
this zone right here, this area right here, that's Anthony Volpe's like power swing. He sometimes will kind of sell out and try to really hit it, but right, this is what he does that Rizzo doesn't. And I think that's actually a bad thing. Anthony Volpe is not a power hitter. He cannot swing. He has a below average swing, right? He swings less hard than the average hitter. And so I think this is like this. These are like the fly out swings right here, Whereas, if he was over here, if he was one of these guys, we're going to look at someone who's like that in a second. If he was one of these guys, well, then Anthony Volpe would have, a lot of balls that he could hit for a home run. But when Volpe is swinging like this, he's swinging for flyouts. And I think that's a problem. Rizzo has a lot of bloop singles. These are bloop single swings right here.
Right, you just go the other way and he drops it into left field. He had that the other day. That was a big hit. Helped the Yankees win a game.
So I think this explains why Rizzo and Volpe are good hitters. Now let's take a look at the best hitter, because there's some other stats we're going to look at in a second that help us out a little bit. Juan Soto. I think these stats show why Juan Soto is one of the best hitters. Now, he doesn't adjust his swing. Right, so he doesn't do the Rizzo thing. Soto has a basically normally distributed swing. Not a lot of variance.
Now, for the readers, that sort of looks like Stanton's, but I would assume it's to the left of Stanton.
It is. He does not swing as hard as Stanton, but there's a big difference between the two of them.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
Same shape as Stanton's, but not as hard. But what that says is that Soto takes the same swing every time. Every single time Juan Soto swings the bat, he is doing the same thing. He is not choking up. He is not swinging for the fences occasionally. Like, he basically takes a swing. Sometimes it's a little harder, sometimes a little bit softer. But Soto has one swing. We
just criticized Stanton for doing that.
Yep. And here's the difference. The difference is how often they square it up. So when Stan swings, he squares up the ball 21.6% of the time. That's really bad. So Luis Arias, when he swings, squares it up 44% of the time. So Arias does not swing very hard.
But he's making double the contact.
He puts it on the sweet spot of the bat very, very often. 44%
of the time, compared to Stanton, who you said was 21 something.
And look at all the other guys up here, right? Nolan Schmanuel, Nicky Lopez, Mookie Betts, interesting one, right? Young-Hoo Lee, Stephen Kwan. Other than Mookie Betts and Juan Soto, there are not a lot of power hitters here, right? These are guys who take light swings. In fact, Mookie Betts, we can look at his chart. Look at that. He's a below average bat speed, even though he's one of the best hitters in the world. But Soto is the only guy up on this list who has an elite bat speed, but also squares it up a lot, right? He has that unique combination of people, which means that this blast statistic, which means how often do you swing hard and square it up? Soto is, I believe, number one in the league. Number two in the league behind the unfortunately recently injured William Contreras. Now, Stan's pretty high up there. He's hitting a lot of blasts. But he's hitting it on a fewer number of pitches, right? So he makes contact. He hits the sweet spot half as much as Soto. But because he swings so hard, basically every time he hits the sweet spot, he's got one of these blasts. But this I think tells you why Soto is so good. We talk a lot about his eyes. Right. Soto is the best at taking pitches, and that's completely true. And, that's why he takes so many walks. But the thing that I've noticed about Soto is that he is the best batter I've seen in a very long time at just hitting the ball flat, right? Just a line drive swing, hard. And that's why he doesn't hit 40 home runs, right? He's a 30-something home run hitter. But I think that's also just why he is so successful, is that if he has a pitch that he wants to swing at, he will hit it nice and straight and line drive. And that's why I think he could win a batting title with the Yankees. I mean, he's just been so incredible. And these numbers kind of confirm it. We can take a look at some of those. You tell me when to stop, but we can take a look at some of those distributions. And I actually have not looked at Mookie Betts yet.
So let's put him on that same chart. Let's put Mookie Betts.
Let's put Mookie Betts next to Juan Soto.
And the other guy I want to see on there, then maybe you could show us, is this all of the new stuff, or is there more?
This is pretty much it. There's a couple of other stats in there that aren't very useful. There's a thing called swords, which just means bad swings, like check swings.
Right. Okay. So let's see. I want to see Aaron Judge too. I'm very interested to see where he feels.
Let's take a look at Aaron Judge. Well, first off, let's just talk about Mookie Betts, and I'll get him off screen.
Right. So what do you have? Mookie and
Mookie and Juan Soto, right? I mean,
so Mookie is the red.
Mookie is the orange, right? So what's interesting here about Mookie Betts is he does not swing very hard, but he has the ability to. So his typical swing is a Luis Arias swing, right? His typical swing is 68 miles per hour. And he has a long tail of a fat tail of, 62 miles an hour, really not swinging very hard, just poking it to the outfield. But when he wants to, like, he can swing as hard as Giancarlo Stanton.
I don't see that on the chart.
So if you look at the orange here, let me get rid of Soto for a second. Look at the orange. See that right tail? Right? He can swing the bat 80 plus miles per hour.
All right. You know what? Because I'm having a harder time seeing the numbers. Okay. Just to make this simple, the up and down number is what on the left side of the screen.
That's just that's the density of swings. So
and the bottom number is the miles per hour.
That's the bat speed. Yes.
I was thinking it was the other way. So the peak was. I was thinking the peak was the hard swing. So you can see. Can you put Stanton up there again? Then
let's put Stanton up there. And we'll take. I haven't actually looked at Judge's chart yet, so we can take a look at Judge.
All right, so Stanton, he comes a little short of Stanton. Stanton's way a little bit to the right of
but he comes short on the average swing, but he's capable of taking a swing that is very, very, very fast.
Yeah, similar.
He just doesn't do it. He chooses not to do it. This is like Ichiro hitting home runs in batting practice.
Right.
So, I mean, absolutely fascinating on Betts. So let's take a look at Aaron Judge. Let's put Judge up against Stanton. That's fascinating. That's cool. Judge is doing a little bit of the Rizzo. Not completely. He's not fully choking up on the bat, but most of the time he's swinging about as hard as he can, and that's a little bit less hard than Stanton, but still Aaron Judgian. So he's still, he's got 76 mile per hour average. But if you look, he's got this bump, which means that sometimes he takes a little bit off his swing. I don't know if that's good for him or not, frankly. I don't see Judge hitting a lot of those kind of bloop singles, but he's still better than average on most of these swings, right? The average major league swing is 72 miles per hour. So even if Judge takes a little off, he's still got it. But this tells me Judge is being a little more strategic than Stanton.
Which is what you want to see, right? Maybe all right. So let me ask you this question. If we were doing this in 2018 or 17, when Stanton hit 59 home runs, we would see a chart that probably looks a lot like Juan Soto's, and he's making the contact and he's hitting the ball hard. And as he's aged, it seems as though the ability to continue to make contact has been problematic. And the last couple of years, it's been a disaster for Stanton. Do you see? So my initial hypothesis is smart hitters learn how to hit. There's times when you sell out and you swing all the way. What's his name? Siri on Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
In that game yesterday, when Caleb Ferguson, I think, was pitching, and he threw the pitch that Siri hit for the grand slam. You almost saw Siri as the pitch is coming going, oh, I'm going to crush this thing. It was like you knew it was happening before it happened. You see his eyes light up. Now, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you see him like, I am going to crush this pitch. And he swung as hard as he could, I guess, and he crushed it. And I was like, I knew he was going to hit a grand slam before he even swung the bat. It just was so
Siri has been such a Yankee killer too, right?
Yeah.
Look,
isn't that what a great hitter does? They look at a situation, they see a pitch, they go, this one I can drive, I'm going to crush it. But that one, outside corner, you know what? I'm just going to dink it, bang, and I'm going to send it into right field or whatever. I think that's what you want out as a hitter. So my worry is... I think
most of the time, yes, right? So Siri, you can see, has that long tail. Right. So he's got all of these hits right here where he's swinging really, really hard, but typically he's swinging like an average major league player. And he even has kind of the Anthony Rizzo choke up option right here. But if I look at Soto, right, Soto doesn't do that, but Soto also has an inhuman ability to put the barrel of the ball on the bat, right?
Yeah.
Put the sweet spot of the ball, of the bat in the ball.
So my worry is Soto's skill set something that may not age well?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Angela's
Angela has a
got
question for us.
Yes, let's see. Angelo asks, is there a way to view the chart as to where the player hits the ball? For example, does Judge hit at a lower bat when he drives the ball to right center, but at a higher speed when he pulls the ball?
There isn't yet. I'd love to see that split. That'd be really cool. Especially, for, if you have a slower swing, you're more likely to be able to pull it to bring it to the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
So not yet. You can, however, look at pitchers.
Oh, they have this for pitchers too?
You can look at, batters against. Now, I will say most pitchers are going to have a very normal distribution because they're seeing so many different batters who each have a different swing style. But we could compare Nestor Cortes to, let's compare him to Stroman. Let's see how similar that is. Pretty similar. So most pitchers are going to be pretty close to the average, right? Stroman's basically exactly on the average.
Can you put in the, what's his name, Miller from Oakland, that closer who throws 5 billion miles an hour?
Pretty close to average. In fact, Cortez is the one that looks a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just him throwing batters off a little bit. But pitchers are going to be pretty, again, because they're seeing all of the batters. The batters are the ones who are swinging. But Cortez has kind of flattened this distribution out a little bit, which basically means that I think batters are a little bit off when they have him. I think it looks like they're kind of swinging a little harder. So this is a little bit right skewed. So that means that maybe batters think they can hit Stroman's, Cortez's stuff, and they swing harder, and then they miss. That's consistent with this.
I'm gonna. There's a book. I have it on my shelf, but it's across the room, so I'm not going to get up and get it. But as you know, I still play baseball and I pitch, and I'm 55 years old. I'm going to be 56 in 2 months, and I don't throw hard like most of the pitchers in the two leagues I pitch in. But I learned something a number of years ago reading a book that was written by Jamie Moyer, who stuck around forever. He was a crafty lefty who, won well over 200 games. He actually had a very successful career, and I think he's the oldest pitcher in the last 50 years to win a game. I think he won a game at like 48 years old. I forget, but something like that. But he said, I would get myself in trouble. And the same thing, I learned from this because this is what I would learn. I learned that, yes, when I read it, my eyes lit up because I said, this is what happens to me. I can't throw hard. I'm not going to hit 80 miles an hour. I might on an occasion hit 70, but I bet you I don't even do that very often, if ever. And Jamie Moyer would say, I'd get myself in trouble when I try to throw a fastball past a guy. And if they were expecting my fastball, they'd crush it because I guess couldn't throw hard. I became better when I learned to throw slower. And I think you might see a little bit of that with Nestor, is if you realize that hitting is also timing and you can mess with the batter's timing, it's going to be harder for them to hit the ball hard off you. And when I come out of the game and they bring in a pitcher who throws a lot harder than me, the same guys who are hitting weak pop-ups and ground balls are all of a sudden hitting balls really hard. And I'm thinking, well, that's because he's throwing harder. They're hitting it harder. So there has to be something to that, no?
I agree completely, right? I mean, like, it doesn't make sense that Nestor Cortes is as good as he is, or Marcus Stroman has been as good as he is throughout his career. But these are guys who are able to do it. And I mean, I think another part of that is that slower pitches move more. So Nestor Cortes can kind of mess with location just a little bit more than other guys. I think about Mariano Rivera. Every time he lost a tick of velocity, his cutter got better because it just moved a little bit more, and batters are just a little bit more off on it. So I think you're completely right. I've got Alex Verdugo's chart up here, which I think is another fascinating chart. Right, slower than league average, right? He's not a hard swinger, but if you look, he seems to have a couple of different swings. A little bit harder, a little bit softer. Sometimes he can kind of really dial it back and try to go for a power swing. But this is kind of what a high average hitter is supposed to look like. And it reminds me of Verdugo. I mean, sometimes he's Luis Arias. Sometimes he's somebody else. I actually want to bring up Arias' chart here because I think this is so cool. Look at that. Look at that. 53 miles per hour swings he makes. It's I mean, I'm going to be looking at these data for weeks, and I'm going to be following these data as players get injured. I want to see DJ LeMahieu when he gets up. I think he's going to have a really fun chart. And I want to see Jason Dominguez, and I want to see, who supposedly has a lot of bat speed. Another guy who I was thinking of, I wish I had data on him from previous seasons, is Gary Sanchez.
Right, but this only goes to this year, correct? They just came up with this.
This is all only this year, where there's no historical data at all.
Right.
Look at Sanchez. Damn, that's interesting.
But that's just this year.
Just this year.
Right.
But Sanchez has this wide distribution, and sometimes he can hit, Stanton Judge kind of, when we know that. He's got that X velocity, and sometimes he slows it down a little bit. So that's kind of fun.
Which I don't think we saw a whole lot with the Yankees.
No, not at all. I think he's hitting really well right now. Like I think he's a better hitter now than he was toward the end of his Yankee tenure. But Pete Gary Sanchez, I think you'd see this shifted to the right a little bit. Frankly, I wish we had these data on Giancarlo Stanton 10 years ago.
That's what I was saying. So I'm wondering how sustainable, which is going to be an interesting thing. When they have 10 years of this data, Juan Soto could conceivably keep that same swing and be very productive for the next 15 years and sign a $60 million a year contract. It probably won't be that high, but sign a $50 million a year contract for 15 years and keep that same distribution and be very productive. And you go, well, some guys can do it. Or he could sign that $50 million contract for 15 years and his production falls off the cliff, sort of like Stanton, but his swing never changes. And you say, after 15 years of data like this, and a guy becomes a free agent, the next Juan Soto, whoever that is, 15 years from now, it's 25 years old, and you look at that chart, and that could really guide the way if patterns emerge on the way teams decide whether or not they're going to sign guys to long-term deals and how much they're going to pay them. They might say, you're great right now, but what your approach to hitting doesn't seem like something that's going to age well. It's not something that's going to really work throughout your 30s. And so I'm not going to give you a deal that's going to make your career go throughout your 30s. See, I think like Hank Aaron would have a swing that's much more consistent, because he obviously hit 40 home runs, but never 60 home runs. Like he hit 40 home runs every year, no matter what. He'd hit 40 home runs. And I think he hit 40 on the nose a bunch of times. Like he had a consistent swing that worked and that was transferable over time. But I obviously, like Giancarlo Stanton's swing is not. And the question will be whether Juan Soto's is. But this could really determine how teams react to free agents once there's some amount of data that's historically relevant.
I mean, look, if I were working in a major league front office, I'd be going ham on these data right now, right? Like I think I think what I would do is and maybe I'll do this once I can I think I can download the data. I would have some way to measure, and there's statistics that can measure this. Essentially the flatness of this distribution. That's how much a batter can vary how hard they swing. And I suspect that is associated with better situational hitting, right? The ability to get a single when you want it, get a home run when you want it.
Right, and that's what you want from a hitter. Maybe, I'm going to take the chart down and bring us back.
Yeah, so maybe, right? So let's think about this, right? What is Juan Soto's superpower? Like, why is he such a good hitter? These data aren't just showing the distribution of swing speed, but also how often they square it up. And Juan Soto's basically the best in the world at that. And for someone who swings so hard, there's really no competition. And so what is Juan Soto's superpower? I think it's the ability to see the baseball. It's not necessarily the swing. The swing is really good, right? He can swing hard, and he has a very consistent swing. But Juan Soto, we know this from the strike zone judgment. We know this from the walks. And then I think these data show that it extends to when he swings for good reason.
And he knows what that's a great point. He's swinging.
I think that's gonna age better than any skill you can buy. And whenever I think about Giancarlo Stanton, I think about the story of when Barry Bonds was his hitting coach. I don't know if you remember this season. It was the year before he hit the 58 home runs. And the Marlins brought in Bonds to try to work specifically with Stanton and a few others to try to kind of unlock all of his potential. I think Stanton was like 25, 26 at the time. And had hit well and had a couple of those like freak injuries. He got hit in the face with the ball that one time with a pitch and broke, I think, a big part of his face and all that. And then he had a problem that Bonds was a terrible coach. And Barry Bonds, Giancarlo Stanton kept asking Barry Bonds, how do I hit a slider? And Bonds would just say, you see the swing, the spin on the slider, and you don't swing at it. And Giancarlo Stanton's like, but I can't see it. You, Barry Bonds, the best ever, can see the spin on the slider, and you can see the seams perfectly, know exactly where it's going to go. I can't do it.
That's interesting.
Bonds had no answer.
I have a similar story to that.
Right? Like Bonds had no answer for that. He just said, well, just don't swing at it. Just look at it. And Giancarlo Stanton saying, I can't do it. Giancarlo Stanton had one of the worst seasons of his younger part of his career when Bonds was a hitting coach. I don't know what he changed in that big 2017, I think, season when he hit all those home runs. But I think that we still have that same Stanton who just can't see it. He just can't do it. But Soto can. And I think if I had to pick a skill for a batter that's going to last throughout most of his career, I think that's the skill. I think the batting eye can only get better. Like Soto is only 25, as we've heard a million times. Like he will see more pitches, and he will get better. Like hitters get better at this over time. Like I don't think his like eyesight is going to age as well as people's knees, right? Like or as poorly as people's knees. It's going to age pretty well. And
there's a story. Oh, go on.
Go for it.
Oh, all right. So there's a story. Ted Williams sounds like his type of hitting. He would tell. Now he was actually a great hitting coach. There's stories like when he was the manager of the Washington Senators, right? That all these guys who didn't hit, he helped them learn how to hit. Eddie Brinkman was like a 170 hitter, and he had his best season when Ted Williams was the manager because he helped them learn how to hit. But he used to say, I could tell if I hit the ball with the seams or against the seams. So I would imagine if you hit the ball with the seams, you're hitting it as it's spinning out of the pitcher's hand, like right here, right? You're hitting it with the seams. But if the ball's spinning and you hit it here, you're hitting it against the seams. And he would say, like, I knew when I hit the ball, imagine this thing spinning. Well, you have like a half a second from the pitcher's hand, and it's turning over as it's coming to you. And he's like, yeah. Anyway, so people are like, that's just, nobody has eyesight like that. And he said, no, I could. And this was years. I think it's like 10 years after he retired. He goes, I can probably still do that. So they dipped his bat in pine tar or paint or something like that. And they had a pitcher throw to him, and they threw like 50 pitches. The specifics, I could be wrong. It's a story, but the main point is true. And every time he'd hit the ball, he'd go like, boom, against the seams. Boom, with the seams. Boom, against the seams. And then they pick up the ball because it's going to have a mark on it because his bat had paint or pine tar on it. And darn if he wasn't right like 80 or 90% of the time. And this was 10 years after he retired, right? Like that was his skill. He could see those pitches. That's why he didn't swing at bad pitches, because he's like, that's a bad pitch. I know exactly. I can watch that spin. I can see where that ball's going to go. And what you're saying is Barry Bonds sort of said.
And that's who Juan Soto gets compared to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Juan Soto had like people are calling him the modern day Ted Williams, and it's not crazy. I don't think he's Barry Bonds. Right? I don't think Juan Soto is ever going to hit 50 home runs. Just look at his swing. It's too flat. Like, it just doesn't, he's not going to get enough balls that, uppercutted to hit that many home runs, but he doesn't need to, right? Like, he could hit 320 with a 400 on base for the next 15 years. Easy. Like, I wouldn't shock me at all. And I think, and maybe he's got a little more in him. Maybe he can improve his strike zone judgment a little bit more. I mean, I believe it. And so maybe it's by design that he doesn't think too hard, or he doesn't do the Rizzo thing. He's a better hitter than Rizzo by a lot, right? Better hitter than Rizzo ever was. At like peak Anthony Rizzo was a great major league hitter, but Juan Soto is way, way, way better. So I don't know, like, and look, and maybe, he loses a little bit of strength, a little bit of bat speed, and he decides to, do a little bit of a Rizzo. That's possible, but I suspect that if I looked at a lot of the great hitters, I think they take the same swing every time, and judgment is the difference. Aaron Judge is somewhere in between, right? We saw he's got that little bit of a slower swing he sometimes takes, but I think he's I think Soto's a better hitter than Judge because just because of that barrel rate. Like if I actually haven't looked at the Judge's sweet spot rate, but I bet it's not great. How often does Judge square it up? Not very often. Kind of middle of the pack, 128th in baseball. So Judge doesn't square it up that often. Now he's also had a rough season. If we had 2022 data, but he's squaring it up quite a lot. And Judge is one of those guys that because he swings even harder than Soto, when he does square it up, it's going far. But he
also swings and misses a lot.
He does, and he strikes out a lot more than Soto. Soto strikes out half as much as Aaron Judge. I think. I mean, look, if we've been talking about what's going well this season, take a look at Aaron Judge's numbers now. Like Aaron Judge's StatCast page is looking like peak Aaron Judge again, and that's not like splitting the season up. That's not saying like since April 20th. That's the entire season. Since whatever, I forget where you cut it off, but if you cut off the last 2 weeks or so, Aaron Judge is back. And I that's fun. I love it. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. Let's do this.
Well, this could be the most exciting tandem that, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Maybe
we talked about all offseason, right? I mean, that was the fun part.
But I think maybe it was last week with Mike Whiteman and Andy Singer where we mentioned this. I think it was because Mike and I talked about Mattingly and Winfield. I can't think of a 1-2 punch that the Yankees have ever had that replicates Juan Soto and Aaron Judge if they're both at their peak doing what they should do. It has to be Mantle Maris, or Ruth Gehrig or Gehrig DiMaggio.
I'm with you there. I don't think that there's let's see how well they do by the end of the season. Right? Like things can change, batters can get hurt, they can whatever, right? But that's the hope of trading for Juan Soto. That's why you want to re-sign the guy. Like I'm all in. Like let's give him all the money. I don't think I've had as much fun watching a batter in a long time. And I watched Aaron Judge's 2022 season.
Yes, because there's the difference is Aaron Judge is a great hitter who does great things, and it's exciting when you see a guy hit a ball 5 billion miles away and a majestic home run. And yeah, of course that's exciting. And then when they compile a whole bunch of them in a season, oh my goodness, he's got 50 home runs. He's got 60 home runs. This is crazy. That's fun. But outside of that, he's not all that dynamic. He's not all that exciting. But Juan Soto brings it's a movie. It's a show when he gets up the plate. Like, the pitcher will just miss, and he'll look at him and be like, no.
Aaron Judge has a little bit of Derek Jeter in him, right? He's got a lot of Derek Jeter in him. Right? Yeah. A little bit of that kind of like, I'm above it all. I'm a Yankee. I'm going to be the nicest guy in the world. And I think Juan Soto's got, I can't even think of like Jorge Posada in him or something. I don't know. Aloha, Rick.
No, Juan Soto's got Juan Soto in him. You know,
you're right. I can't think of any other player like him, right? I mean, with that kind of attitude, with that kind of,
I just love it. He brings a energy, a positivity, I am going to beat you. You can't beat me. I mean, go back to that first series. Josh Hader comes out of the bullpen, and Soto's like, "I own you. You're not going to get me out." And he didn't. And he got that.
He's young. He's young, right? Like he's got that kind of like 25-year-old like chip on his shoulder, and some 25-year-olds have that chip on their shoulder, and they don't really deserve it, but he deserves it, right? Yes. And so like I'm okay with Juan. Like what catcher is going to be like, oh, Juan Soto, you did a little dance, let's whatever beat him. Like no, like it's Juan Soto. Like we're gonna.
He's not doing it to show anybody up. That's the other part of it. You don't get the sense that
he's not at all. No,
being himself.
Oh, he's laughing and smiling. He's talking to people. He's he says something to a catcher when the catcher gets hit by a foul ball. Like it's like he enjoys playing the game of baseball. I love it. I tell you, I for some reason when we trade for him, like I had this image in my mind that Juan Soto is like a bit of a dick, right? Like he's got a little bit of attitude, and he's gonna have to be tamed by New York. But that wasn't the case at all. Like he's just expressive. I remember when I think he sat behind home plate during one of the World Series a few years ago. And he was just like, every pitch, he was just like, look at that. And that was pretty cool. I don't know. I'm enjoying this Yankee team. I think it is my favorite Yankee team since I started doing the podcast in 2014, at least. And before that, like the 9, 10, 11 Yankees were a lot of fun. I really like that team. But I mean, this is up there with them. And the 9-10 Yankees, they were fun, but hey, we had seen Derek Jeter win a ring. We had seen Jorge Posada, Andy Pettitte, those guys win things. We haven't seen Aaron Judge deep in the playoffs, a confident team that we thought was going to win, right? We saw him get beat by the Astros, and that's not happening this year. I'm excited for that. Like I'm excited for the Yankees O's ALCS. Like that's going to be weird. And it's going to be a rivalry. And I think it's going to be good. And frankly, the Red Sox are getting good again. And maybe there'll be a Yankees Red Sox rivalry. That's kind of fun, but I want to watch this team play. But the weird thing is that this is the 1 year, right? Like half of these guys are free agents.
Yes.
Like Clay Holmes is having the best stretch of his career by far, free agent. Juan Soto, we're talking about, is going into free agency at the peak of his game. He's going to cost $1 billion.
Right. You can't let Juan Soto go.
I mean, I hope so, but I mean, who knows what dumb offer someone's going to, I give him an ownership stake. I don't care. Right. Like I'm up for Juan Soto. I'm up for Verdugo, who's a free agent. I'd love to re-sign Verdugo. I think he's a lot of fun to watch. He's one of those guys that plays
for him. Unfortunately, Dominguez
there's a lot of outfielders coming up.
High on Spencer Jones. I mean,
it's true.
What do you do, Verdugo?
And outfield is one of those spots that you can find a guy. I hope. Mm-hmm. I mean, it took him forever to find a left fielder, but like
the Yankees didn't do very well with that the last couple of years.
But like, yeah, I'm with you there. But I don't know. So he seems to be having a good time.
I feel like I'd love to have him. I don't know where you play him. Except if somehow they transfer Aaron Judge to play first base and you get rid of Giancarlo Stanton somehow.
Then you figure that one of Jones or Dominguez doesn't work out, which is pretty possible.
It's very possible, of course.
Yeah. But if Dominguez comes back this season, then it's crazy.
That's our Tuesday discussion, by the way, for tomorrow on Start Spreading the News at 10 a.m. Let me get the banner up there for everybody, just in case. 10 a.m. We asked our writers. There's an article by Bob Clappish that says that Verdugo is going to be the odd man out when Dominguez comes back. Now, that's assuming Dominguez is healthy. Dominguez does come back. He plays well in the minor leagues, and I bring him up. And who would be the odd man out? And Clappish says it could be Alex Verdugo. I hope not, because Verdugo's having such a good year. EJ, this was fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for educating me and everybody else. For everybody, this has been the Start Spreading the News podcast. There's nothing better. Though the Bronx Beat podcast that EJ runs, which airs every Sunday and then on Start Spreading the News on Monday, is pretty much just as good, of course. EJ, of course, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll be back again here next Monday night at 9 p.m. Have a great night.